Your brain doesn't trip, it reorganizes, and what happens in those few hours might rewire how you see yourself for the rest of your life. Psilocybin, the active compound in magic mushrooms, doesn't just make you see weird stuff, it temporarily dismantles the rigid, efficiency-obsessed patterns your brain runs on autopilot every single day. Networks that usually enforce your entire story of self relax. Communication between distant brain regions that rarely talk to each other suddenly surges. New patterns of emotion, memory, and meaning bubble up from places you didn't know existed. This isn't chaos. This is precision demolition followed by radical reconstruction. If you want to understand how consciousness actually works, hit that subscribe button. We're diving deep into neuroscience that most people never hear about. So, let's start with the brain you're using right now. In ordinary waking life, your brain is obsessed with one thing: minimizing surprise. It's constantly running predictions, building models of reality that are good enough, not necessarily accurate. Energy conservation wins over complete truth every single time. The default mode network, or DMN, is the star player in this system. It supports self-referential thinking, autobiographical memory, mental time travel. Essentially, it's your brain's narrative generator about me. It's the voice in your head telling your life story on loop. And when you're depressed, that loop gets vicious. DMN activity is especially linked to rumination and self-focused thought. You know that feeling of being stuck in repetitive inner monologues? That's your DMN working overtime. Research shows that depressive states aren't chaotic or random, they're overstable and rigid. Your cognition locks into pessimistic loops. Hyperactivity and hyperconnectivity within DMN regions have been directly associated with major depressive disorder. The medial prefrontal cortex, a key hub in this network, shows pathological hyperactivity connected to brooding and self-criticism. Those brutal identity loops that make you feel trapped, they're not random suffering, they're repetition. Your brain keeps playing the same broken record because that's what it's learned to do. After you ingest psilocybin, your body rapidly converts it to psilocin, the molecule that actually crosses the blood-brain barrier and drives the experience. Psilocin acts primarily as a partial agonist at 5-HT2A serotonin receptors. These receptors are packed densely in cortical regions linked to perception and higher cognition. They're highly expressed in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain handling planning, decision-making, and high-level interpretation of sensory input. They're also abundant in sensory and association areas, making them a leverage point for completely altering how incoming information gets processed and integrated. Pharmacology and imaging work suggest that psychedelics don't inject hallucinations into your brain. They alter gain and filtering in cortical circuits. More raw, unusual signals reach your conscious awareness. Think of it as the filter theory of consciousness. Under psychedelics, the top-down filters that normally suppress or tidy up perception get relaxed. Psychological tests confirm this. People under psilocybin show disrupted attentional tracking and altered temporal judgments. The brain's usual control systems are being loosened. And subjectively, people consistently report that reality feels more real, more unfiltered, as if everyday consciousness had been running with blinders on the whole time. Under normal conditions, your brain networks are organized hierarchically. High-level regions predict and constrain lower-level sensory areas. Top-down order is enforced constantly. The entropic brain theory proposes that psychedelics relax this hierarchy entirely, increasing neural entropy and allowing bottom-up signals way more influence. fMRI data shows reduced activity and connectivity in key control hubs like the medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex during psilocybin. That's weakened top-down dominance in action. When this predictive grip loosens, sensations feel fresh and intensified because they're not immediately overwritten by familiar expectations. Connectivity analyses reveal a less differentiated network structure. Traditional boundaries between large-scale networks blur. This matches exactly what people report. Thoughts feel fluid and less constrained, as if mental categories temporarily lose their rigid edges. Researchers use a jazz band metaphor. Instead of following one fixed score, the brain explores a richer variety of transient connectivity states. and these more flexible dynamics have been directly linked to therapeutic response. The collapse of hierarchy isn't destabilizing, it's psychologically beneficial. Network analyses show psilocybin increases global integration between cortical areas. Regions that rarely communicate suddenly synchronize. Visual networks show massive connectivity changes, overlapping perfectly with reports of intensified imagery, complex visual patterns, symbolic scenes. Emotional circuits display altered responses. Studies show reduced amygdala reactivity to negative stimuli and more positive mood. Connectivity between memory-related regions and other networks gets modified. That's why autobiographical memories and life narratives feel newly vivid, newly available. Participants describe crosstalk between senses, seeing sounds, feeling colors. Classic synesthesia. Brain imaging shows these experiences arise from increased communication between typically segregated sensory and association areas. There's no single hallucination center. Music under psilocybin reliably evokes strong emotional and autobiographical responses, consistent with strengthened links between auditory, emotional, and memory networks. People aren't seeing fake things. They're experiencing connections and associations that everyday filtering normally hides from view. Ego dissolution sounds mystical, but the neuroscience is concrete. The ego, in brain terms, is your predictive self-model, a set of expectations about me that organize perception and behavior. Psilocybin acutely decreases activity and connectivity in DMN hubs that underlie narrative self-focus. Studies directly link the intensity of ego-dissolving experiences to the degree of DMN disruption and altered connectivity with hippocampal regions. When the self-model quiets, boundaries between self and world feel less rigid. Feelings of unity or merging with surroundings emerge naturally. This loosening reduces defensive responses because events aren't being evaluated through the same rigid self-protection lens anymore. Clinical reports show that under supportive conditions, people can revisit traumatic material with way less panic when ego boundaries are softened but not annihilated. Decreased coupling between the anterior hippocampus and DMN persists for weeks after the experience. That's proposed as a mechanistic correlate of increased psychological flexibility and reduced grip of old self stories. Large analyses identify ego dissolution and mystical type qualities as key mediators of symptom improvement. Drug exposure alone doesn't predict outcomes. What happens to your sense of self during the experience does. Controlled experiments show psilocybin impairs accurate production of longer time intervals and synchronizations of slower rhythms. Participants report time slowing, stretching, disappearing altogether. Experiences of timelessness associate with stronger suppression of the DMN. Emotional salience gets amplified. Acute effects include reduced negative mood, increased positive mood, altered responses to emotional stimuli. Users describe ordinary stimuli like music, nature, simple thoughts as deeply meaningful or symbolic. Neuroimaging shows heightened integration in networks supporting valuation and emotion. The brain's importance filter, which normally prioritizes certain stimuli, appears relaxed. More internal and external events feel relevant at once. Pattern recognition and novel associations spike. That's the surge of insights and creative connections people report. Mystical type experiences under psilocybin are often rated as among the most meaningful events of a person's entire life. Lasting shifts in how they interpret reality follow. This inflation of meaning is double-edged. It can support transformative insight, but setting, and integration become crucial so that significance is channeled constructively rather than spiraling into confusion. Depression is increasingly characterized in network terms as rigid, overconnected loops within systems like the DMN and underconnected control networks. Stuck, repetitive thinking. Clinical trials of psilocybin for major depression show rapid and substantial reductions in depression scores. Many participants remain in response or remission weeks after dosing. Psilocybin increases network integration and flexibility, counteracting the rigid dynamics typical of depressive states. PTSD and trauma can be framed as overprotective prediction systems. The brain overestimates threat based on past injury, keeping the body and mind on high alert. Studies are testing psilocybin-assisted therapy for PTSD, hypothesizing that the combination of loosened networks and guided exposure can help reprocess traumatic memories. Reduced amygdala reactivity to negative stimuli under psilocybin may lower the emotional volume of fear responses during therapeutic work. Participants report that traumatic memories become approachable and reframable, as if the brain can finally look at them without being flooded. Across studies, psychological mediators like emotional breakthrough, mystical experience, and ego dissolution consistently predict better symptom outcomes beyond pharmacology alone. Psilocybin and related psychedelics increase markers of neuroplasticity, including brain-derived neurotrophic factor and synaptic growth. Precision fMRI studies showing persistent reductions in hippocampus DMN connectivity after psilocybin support the idea of enduring network-level reconfiguration. Increased flexibility in brain dynamics, more frequent and varied transitions between network states, has been proposed as a mechanism for enhanced adaptability after treatment. Emotional and cognitive changes persist for weeks. Reduced negative mood, increased positive affect, improved stress scores. Personality research finds significant lasting increases in the trait of openness after a high-dose psilocybin session, especially when the experience is strongly mystical. These shifts are larger than those usually seen over decades of adult life or even after successful antidepressant treatment. Integration practices like therapy, journaling, behavior change are thought to capitalize on this plastic window, helping solidify more adaptive patterns. The drug session provides a window of opportunity. What people do afterward largely determines which new pathways get strengthened. Despite intense acute disruption, brain networks gradually restabilize after psilocybin. Overall connectivity returns closer to baseline over days. The DMN, executive, and sensory networks regain their usual segregation and hierarchy. The familiar sense of self and reality returns, but some specific connections, like reduced coupling between anterior hippocampus and DMN, remain altered for weeks. That's a reorganized configuration, not a full reset. Clinically, this aligns with lasting decreases in depression and anxiety scores long after acute drug effects vanish. Personality data showing enduring increases in openness support the idea that the reform system is more flexible and receptive. Qualitative reports frequently mention reduced fear of death, shifts in spiritual or existential outlook, a more connected sense of self and world. The persistence of meaning and perspective change, despite the return of everyday filters, is one reason psilocybin is being explored for end-of-life distress and death anxiety. The brain comes back online, but with some pathways rerouted and some old narrative habits weakened. So, what does all this actually mean? Your brain might come back from a psilocybin experience, but it doesn't come back the same. And the question nobody's asking is whether the version of you that returns is the one you were always supposed to be, or just another story your brain decided to tell.